in the last couple of years, have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life for addressing these issues?
Yes, personally.
Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record an article by News Nation, and it follows Mr. Grusch's full interview for the record.
Without objection.
Have human beings been hurt or killed by a non-human intelligence?
While I can't get into the specifics because that would reveal certain U.S. classified operations, I was briefed by a few individuals on the program that there were malevolent events like that. The logical fallacy there is because they're advanced, they're kind. We'll never really understand full intent in that because we're not them, whatever them is or are. But I think what appears to be malevolent activity has happened.
People have just heard you say non-humans may well have murdered human beings.
That seems to be the case at one point. Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to the Gabriel Speaks Podcast. I want to welcome y'all. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this content, you want more videos like it. Today, we're going to be reviewing the UAP hearings. Now, when I say the UAP hearings, what I mean are the 3 main UAP hearings that took place in 2023, 2024, and 2025. We had witnesses from George Knapp to Dylan Borland to one of the most really controversial, David Grusch. Not because he's a controversial figure, but because some of the claims he made as far as agreements with N.H.I and biologics that we currently have in our possession. So this episode, we're going to take a look at the 3 UAP hearings, and more importantly, we're going to look at if this is a narrative or if this is real transparency. Or is it somewhere in between? Personally, I believe the UAP investigation was started in earnest, and there were good actors behind trying to find the answers to some of these unknowns in our sky. Unfortunately, I also think that throughout the process of trying to disclose what the government does and does not know about these things, interested parties have become involved. And those interested parties aren't necessarily interested in true disclosure. In the United States, what our corporations are typically interested in are making money. Making money off of this process in one way or another. And we'll see as they testify at some of these hearings that some of these aerospace companies, contractors, that are most likely involved with at least some of the materials that have been recovered over the decades, aren't really interested in disclosure, and they're not really interested in bringing other parties into the equation. So I want to thank you for tuning back in again. We're going to start with the first hearing. Again, this was really an eye-opener for a lot of folks. We had one of our top security intelligence officials tell us that we have UFO aircraft and non-human biologics in our possession. Now, are those claims true? That's what folks have been debating ever since those hearings. David Grusch was an honorable intelligence official who served this country honorably, and when tasked with trying to find out if there was something to this UFO, UAP phenomena, went out and did his job. I believe David Grusch. I believe he's telling the truth. I also believe people can lie. And maybe David Grusch was lied to about certain facts. I have cut this down quite a bit, substantially, to the main points that were made during this hearing. So here is the first hearing in 2023 with David Grusch, David Fravor, and Ryan Graves.
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do.
Our first witness is Lieutenant Ryan Graves. He's the Executive Director of Americans for Safe Aerospace. Lieutenant Graves is also a former U.S. Navy F-18 pilot with his own UAP experience. The next witness, David Grusch, is a former senior intelligence officer with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and was a senior technical advisor for UAP issues. And finally, retired Navy Commander David Fravor, squadron leader who worked as a naval aviator for 18 years. Mr. Fravor has his own UAP experience, known as the TikTok event. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that all the witnesses answered in the affirmative. You may be seated.
My name is Ryan Fobbs Graves, and I'm a former F-18 pilot with a decade of service in the U.S. Navy, including 2 deployments in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Inherent Resolve. In 2014, I was an F-18 Foxtrot pilot in the Navy Fighter Attack Squadron 11, the Red Rippers, and I was stationed at NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. After upgrades were made to our jet's radar systems, we began detecting unknown objects operating in our airspace. At first, we assumed they were radar errors, but soon we began to correlate the radar tracks with multiple onboard sensors, including infrared systems, eventually through visual ID. During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, 2 F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter.
So to be clear, a sphere with a black cube inside of it split 2 of our most advanced airfighter jets down the middle like it was nothing. This is not the first time we've heard of the cube inside of the kind of bubble looking thing. We've heard a few different reports of this type of object from multiple pilots. Does not sound like something natural. It sounds like something technological, to me anyway.
The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sightings. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs. If everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issue this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are concerned for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies. It is long overdue.
My name is David Charles Grusch. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years, both in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard, and Reserve, at the rank of major, and most recently from 2021 to 2023, following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country. In 2019, the UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower. As you know, I've suffered retaliation for my decision, but I am hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency.
As you know, my name is David Fravor. I'm a retired commander in the United States Navy. In 2004, I was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. We were attached to Carrier Wing 11, stationed on board the USS Nimitz, and had begun a 2-month workup cycle off the coast of California. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended, and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet, and the controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All four of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping-pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my Wizzo and I decided to go down and take a closer look with the other aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the tic-tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned it with my aircraft, and began to climb. We continued down another 270 degrees, nose low, where the tic-tac, or we considered 270 degrees to where, and we went nose low to where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingman, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to them, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar, and I can get into modes later if you're interested. What is shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated. None of my crew were ever questioned. Tapes were never taken, and after a couple days, it turned into a great story with friends. It wasn't until 2009 until Jay Stratton had contacted me to investigate. Unbeknownst to all, he was part of the ATIP program in the Pentagon led by Lou Elizondo. And there was an official report that came out that's now on the internet. Years later, I was contacted by the other pilot, Alex Dietrich, and asked if I'd been contacted, and I said no, but I'm willing to talk. I was contacted by Mr. Elizondo, and we talked for a short period of time, and he said we'd be in contact. A few weeks after that, I was made aware that Lou had left the Pentagon in protest and joined forces with Tom DeLonge, Chris Mellon, Steve Justice, and others to form Two Stars Academy, an organization that pressed the issue with leading industry experts and U.S. government officials. They worked with Leslie Keane, who is present today, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper to publish the articles in the New York Times 2017 New York Times. And it removed the stigma on the topic of UFOs, which is why we're here today.
So why are these hearings a perfect Psyop delivery system? Well, they create an officialness without necessarily creating proof. You've got senators asking these hard-hitting questions to these witnesses under oath. But when it comes to providing evidence to the claims, it's either hearsay or I'll see you in a SCIF. The witnesses can be very credible while still being handled, constrained, or misdirected. And you are going to hear even David Grusch mention that. If you have a career intelligence guy whose ladder to promotion is threatened if they don't get in line and stay quiet, what are they probably going to do? Get in line, stay quiet.
Are pilots that you interact with as part of your organization, do you feel adequately trained and briefed on how to handle encounters with UAPs?
No. Right now, military witnesses to UAP have limited options for reporting UAP. But more concerning is that commercial aviation sector has not adapted to the lessons that the military has implemented.
Could you tell me why you believe it's, kind of to play the devil's advocate, a reason why some of this stuff should not be available to the public?
There's certainly some national security concerns when we use our advanced sensors in our tactical jets to be able to identify these objects. However, there's no reason that the objects themselves would be classified. I would be curious to see how the security classification guideline actually spells out the different nuances of how this topic is classified from the perspective of UAP, not national security.
Mr. Fravor, the TikTok incident that you were engaged occurred in 2004. What kind of reporting took place after that incident?
None. We had a standard debrief where the backseaters went down to our carrier intel center and briefed what had happened, and that was it. No one else talked to us, and I was in the top 20 in the battle group. No one came. The captain was aware, the admiral was aware, nothing was done.
Did your commanding officers provide any sort of justification?
No, because I was the commanding officer of the squadron, so no.
Do you believe UAPs pose a potential threat to our national security?
I'll do it. Yes, and here's why. The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had, and you could put that anywhere. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work, you're talking something that can go into space, go someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants, and leave, and there's nothing we can do about it.
First, when we were first experiencing these objects off the eastern seaboard in the 2014 to 2015 time period, anyone that had upgraded their radar systems were seeing these objects. So there was a large number of my colleagues that were detecting these objects off the eastern seaboard.
And both to Mr. Fravor as well as Mr. Graves, not having this system for reporting, would you both agree that it's harmful to not just our national security interests, but to understand this phenomenon of what's happening with UAPs?
I think it's a travesty that we don't have a system to correlate this and actually investigate.
I'll continue to say that the commercial pilots that have reached out to me through Americans for Safe Aerospace are doing so because they don't feel there's another way for them to report this safety issue.
And I think one of the clear outcomes of this hearing already is that there has to be a safe and transparent reporting process for pilots, both on the commercial side and the military side, to be able to report UAPs in a way that's also transparent, but also understands the scope of our national security interests.
Yes, the objects that are being seen by commercial pilots are performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country, and that applies for the military as well.
Mr. Fravor?
Yeah, I concur with that. We have nothing that can stop in midair and go the other direction, nor do we have anything that can, like in our situation, come down from space, hang out for 3 hours, and go back up.
Thank you, Mr. Grusch. Finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General, and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Let's talk about David Grusch's claims that should have made all of us rise up in our seats. One, the U.S. government is in possession of multiple retrieved craft, not one craft from Roswell or one craft from Italy in the late 30s, multiple craft. Some of these craft are of non-human intelligence origin, meaning some are advanced craft that we've retrieved from other nations, I take it, or maybe non-declared nations. Who knows if they were retrieved from some kind of a breakaway civilization. But some of these craft are of non-human intelligence origin. The program has existed for decades, and it was based on extensive interviews with program insiders and not rumors. So this goes beyond unknown objects or advanced drones. It asserts physical possession, not just encounters. And it implies long-term concealment across multiple administrations. Or, if we've heard, some administrations may not have even been read in. How could this be a psyop? Well, it's a high-impact claim paired with zero publicly verifiable artifacts. Nothing. It forces us into belief based on positioning. So it's either trust Grusch versus he's wrong, he's a liar, whatever. Biologics were recovered at some of these crash sites, and the biologics were described as non-human. Now, he did not clarify whether they were alive, engineered, or organic, but he did say biologics described as non-human were recovered in these crashes. This is literally the first time biologics were introduced into congressional testimony regarding this issue. And it raises immediate questions about custody, storage, analysis, oversight. I mean, there could be, if that is true, we could know so much more than we actually say we know. And it escalates the narrative from technology, these recovered crashes, to actual entities, non-human intelligence, actual beings, not just their craft. Right? It'd be a big difference between seeing someone's car and meeting a person for the first time. How could this be a psyop? Well, it uses a deliberately ambiguous term, biologics, right? You could use the term biologics to describe a plant. It allows maximum speculation while staying classification safe. So it maintains the secret, but gives all of us the opportunity to speculate on what it could possibly be. And he did that in the news interview, and the News Nation interview as well, when Ross Coulthart asked him about agreements between our government and non-human intelligence. Another shocking claim Grusch made is that there's illegal program activity going on and congressional deception. Some UAP programs are allegedly operating outside lawful congressional oversight. Well, we've theorized that for years. Funds may have been misappropriated or laundered through defense contractors, absolutely. And that Congress has allegedly been intentionally misled. Ronald Reagan fought a war in Central America, misleading Congress about where funds were going and acquiring funds through illegal and immoral means. So it would not be crazy for an intelligence agency or multiple intelligence agencies to misappropriate funds to build these facilities, to manage these programs, so on and so forth. And this is why the Pentagon has never ever passed a audit, because there's no oversight and they lie about where the money goes. So this could potentially be a governance crisis. We're talking about decades and decades of a governance crisis. And that's why, if there is truth to these legacy programs, they need to be exposed. And they need to be exposed while people involved with them are still breathing. Grusch claimed that he has faced threats, intimidation, and retaliation for coming forward. He lost his security clearance. He alluded to disturbing personal consequences. And he even said one instance included his wife. That does suggest that there's active enforcement of silence going on, not some kind of passive secrecy, which means that everything in this field is open to potential psyops, manipulation, lying, unclear motives, all of the things that have made this field always difficult to try to navigate. But now it's just stepped up a notch because of the flow of information, how quickly information moves. It's a very advanced way to get ahead of it, if in fact that's what this is, some kind of narrative control. Grusch said he could provide names and locations. He stated he could provide program names, contractor names, locations, and documentation. He even said he had a hostile witness list ready to go, but only in a classified SCIF setting. As we know, although he may be a part of the UAP task force, that SCIF setting between himself and those on the UAP task force has yet to happen. So why is that? Why are you able to be on the task force but not make time to get into the SCIF with everyone?
Have anyone been murdered that you would that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Do you believe that you witnessed an additional object under the water in relation to your encounter?
I will say we did not see an object. There was something there to cause the whitewater, and when we turned around, it was gone, so there was something there that obviously moved. No, we actually joked that the Tic Tac was communicating with something when we came back, and because the whitewater disappeared. My crew that launched after we landed experienced significant jamming to the APG-73 radar, which was what we had on board, which is a mechanically scanned, very high-end system prior to the APG-79. And yes, it did pretty much everything you could do, range, velocity, aspect, and then it spit the lock, and the targeting pod is passive. That's what we were able to get the video on.
Mr. Grusch, what about you? What was your experience after you came forward?
Well, it's only been about 2 months or so I guess my experience has been overwhelming support from former colleagues of mine that have privately messaged me, and I do appreciate that. But I do have knowledge of active planned reprisal activity against myself and other colleagues, and it's very, very upsetting to me.
Coming from where?
Certain senior leadership at previous agencies I was associated with. Yeah, there were certain colleagues of mine that were brutally administratively attacked, and it actually makes me very upset as a leader to see that happen to other coworkers and actually superiors of mine over the last 3 years.
How do you account for that response? That seems like a bizarre response.
I call it administrative terrorism. That's their quiver, their tool in the toolbox to silence people, especially. The career government service cares about their career, cares about their clearance, their reputation to climb the ladder. And when you threaten that career path, a lot of people back off.
Actually, I've been treated very well. And the 6 people that were involved, myself included, all of them have or will be retiring from the military as 05s or 06s. And all my friends that are very senior, 3 and 4 stars, I've talked to them, they believe. They understand there's a problem, but no, I was actually treated really well. I'm not like a UFO fanatic. It's not me, but I will tell you that what we saw with 4 sets of eyes over a 5-minute period, still, there's nothing. We have nothing close to it. It was amazing to see. I told my buddy I wanted to fly it, but yeah, it's just an incredible technology.
In the last couple of years, have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life for addressing these issues?
Yes, personally.
To your knowledge, are N.H.Is working with adversarial foreign governments in either technology exchange programs or back engineering programs?
I don't have data on that. I'm not sure.
Have you heard or you had people come forward to present that evidence?
Not that particular evidence that you just espoused.
Okay, on the 19th of April, Dr. Kirkpatrick, head of AARO, had said that he did not find any evidence of UAPs. You also stated that you had, in your interview, that you had briefed him on information that you were uncovering, but that he did not follow up with you. Were the items that you divulged to him pertinent to national security?
Yes, him and I had a classified conversation in April 2022 before he took over AARO in July 2022, and I provided him some concerns I had.
Do you know why he might not have followed up with you?
Unfortunately, I cannot read his mind. I wish he did. I was happy to give sage counsel to him on where to look when he took the helm of AARO.
Mr. Graves, can you please explain to me in detail the event that occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base?
In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of Boeing contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event, I believe 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, there were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting off.
Another question on follow-up referencing the gimbal video Go Fast incident. Can you just clarify, because to our understanding the footage was actually cut off at a certain point, but what happens at the end of that video, just for those Americans specifically there that are wanting to know about the rest of that footage?
Certainly. There was some uncertainty or instability with the object. It seemed to rock a bit, and that's the last I had seen of the video. Much of the data that I would recommend be analyzed would consist of radar data that would provide precise kinematics on the object, as well as the fleet of objects that were operating nearby.
Okay. When those objects broke the sound barrier, did they make a sonic boom?
I was in a jet. You can't hear anything. It's kind of loud in there.
Yeah, you're not able to actually personally tell within the vehicle. I will say the objects that we were seeing, they were spherical, and they were observed up to Mach 2, which is a very non-aerodynamic shape.
Could a human survive those G-forces with known technology today?
No.
No, not for the acceleration rates that we observed.
Have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft?
Yes, I personally interviewed those individuals. So there's, some, I would call it abuse here. So congressional oversight of conventional special access programs, and I'll use Title 10, so DOD as an example, right? So 10 U.S. Code Section 119 discusses congressional oversight of SAPs, discusses the DepSecDef's ability to waive congressional reporting.
Mr. Grusch, are you aware, do you have direct knowledge, or have you talked to people with direct knowledge that there are satellite imagery of these events?
That was one of my primary tasks at NGA, since we process, exploit, and disseminate that kind of information. I've seen multiple cases, some of which, to my understanding, and of course I left NGA in April, so that's my information cutoff date, but I personally reviewed both what we call overhead collection and from other strategic and tactical platforms that were, I could not even explain prosaically, and I have a degree in physics, by the way, as well. And I am aware that you guys have not seen these.
Do you have any information that the U.S. government is involved in a disinformation campaign to deny the existence of certain UAPs?
I can't go beyond what I've already stated publicly in my News Nation interview because it touches other sensitivities.
You go so far as to state that the U.S. is in possession of, quote, non-human spacecraft, end quote, and that some of these artifacts have circulated with defense contractors. However, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the director of AARO, previously testified before Congress that there has been, and I quote, no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity or of, quote, off-world technology brought to the attention of the office.
It's not accurate. I believe Dr. Kirkpatrick mentioned he had about 30 individuals that have come to AARO thus far. A few of those individuals have also come to AARO that I also interviewed, and I know what they provided Dr. Kirkpatrick and their team.
Okay.
I was able to evaluate that information.
I need to go on.
Sure.
But my understanding that his statement is accurate, came from a direct quote.
Only a few weeks ago, 19th of April, the head of the Pentagon's UAP investigations program, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, told Congress AARO, that's the Pentagon's UFO investigation body, has found no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity, off-world technology, or objects that defy the known laws of physics.
While a large number of cases in our holdings remain technically unresolved, this is primarily due to a lack of data associated with those cases.
Was that a lie?
Well, I know Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. I've known him for about 8 years. And, I expressed some concerns to Dr. Kirkpatrick about a year ago and told him what I was starting to uncover. And he didn't follow up with me, and he has my phone number. He could have called me. I hope he ultimately does the right thing. He should be able to make the same investigative discoveries I did. It's totally crazy if he doesn't.
The head of the very body that Congress has ordered to tell the American public the truth about UAPs is possibly misleading the American public. Do you think the American public is being lied to?
Well, they've been lied to over the years, and I'm hoping that the lies stop.
We should investigate the extent to which elements of our government possess or do not possess information that is of critical value to the American people.
Has the U.S. government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial, otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I don't like to denote origin. Keeps the aperture open, both scientifically. Right. Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
What special access programs cover this information, and how is it possible that they have evaded oversight for so long?
I do know the names. Once again, I can't discuss that publicly and how they've evaded oversight. In a closed setting, I can tell you the specific tradecraft used.
Has there been an active U.S. government disinformation campaign to deny the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena? And if so, why?
I can't go beyond what I've already espoused publicly about that.
Okay, I've been told to ask you what that is and how to get it in the record. Yeah.
If you reference my News Nation interview, and I talk about a multi-decade, campaign to disenfranchise public interest, basically. Yeah. Overall, the government has been the custodian of a lot of this, right? And they'll hand receipt it out to a cleared defense contractor to do some analysis, which I find highly unethical. You have basically a sole source arrangement, and you allow certain private corporate elements to look at this, develop a potential insight, and then sell it back to the government for profit. And I think that's totally unethical. Because of the secrecy, there is an environment where you could have almost like a false flag, where true non-prosaic UAP situation could be contrived as a provocation of something from a nation state, and we want to de-escalate that. At the very least, I saw substantive evidence that white-collar crime was committed.
Have people been killed to protect this secret?
Based on the people I talked to, that was an ongoing concern. Yeah, unfortunately, I've heard some really un-American things I don't want to repeat right now.
So you have a strong suspicion that people have been murdered to protect the secret?
Over the years, yeah.
He says our geopolitical rivals have their own crash retrieval programs, which they are also secretly exploiting for military purposes.
We're in a competition with their adversaries to understand this, and it's a multi-decade Cold War that has been under our nose for so long, and there is no good way to level the playing field and hold other nation states accountable if they're doing unethical or illicit activity as it relates to this subject. And I think the obtuse secrecy is actually putting us in a very dangerous position where a country might make a breakthrough that say that's an adversary of ours, and it is so destabilizing.
You say there's been a Cold War behind the scenes with Russia and China.
There has been a Cold War with our peer adversaries, yeah.
Mr. Graves, one of your main concerns is that the FAA currently does not have an official process to receive reports of UAP from pilots or others, correct?
Correct.
And in your experience, what data should the Aero program prioritize for potential collection? We have, location, date, time, but are there other specific characteristics that should be included in these reports?
Certainly. I think that there's two categories that would be important. One would be kinematics and understanding the specifics of how the vehicle or objects are moving. And the second would be a more zoomed out approach of being able to look at origin and destination before the incident, as well as getting a better contextual understanding of how these objects are interacting with each other.
If you were me, where would you look? Titles, programs, departments, regions, if you could just name anything. And I put that as an open question to the three of you.
I'd be happy to give you that in a closed environment. I can tell you specifically.
Thank you. Commander Fravor?
And I would say, and I've told people that you have to know where to look. They're not going to divulge it to you because of the classification levels. But if you know where to look and who to talk to, which is exactly what Mr. Grusch can point you, then you have them.
Okay. Mr. Graves?
I was an operator, so I was depending on folks like Mr. Grusch to do that homework.
You've talked a bit about what I would call misdirection by official U.S. government with regard to UAPs, right? Last week, White House NSC spokesman John Kirby stated that UAPs are having an impact on our training ranges and need to be treated as a legitimate issue. Do you concur with the statements? That's for each of you.
Yes.
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 Okay.
Things are overclassified. I know for a fact the video or the pictures that came out in the 2020 report that had the stuff off the East Coast, they were taken with an iPhone off the East Coast. A buddy of mine was one of the senior people there, and he said they were originally classified at TSSCI. And my question to him was, what's TSSCI about these? They're an iPhone literally off the vacapes. That's not TSSCI. So they're overclassified, and as soon as they do that, they go in a vault, and then you all have to look for them.
Look, I've been here for 6 months, and I'm pretty skeptical. I don't trust anything in this town. At one point, you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured, and the activity, and I got
by UAPs or by people within the federal government?
Both.
There has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed, myself and my wife, was very disturbing.
Couple things to note. If Grusch is lying, this is a massive disinformation failure that took place at some of the highest levels. If Grusch is just mistaken, then what we have is really a systematic intelligence failure, because he was collecting all of this information from others that had either the same or lower level clearance than himself. So if they're providing this information in a truthful manner, but it's not true, that's a problem. That's a failure on our intelligence's part. And lastly, if Grusch is correct, ladies and gentlemen, we have a constitutional and civilizational crisis on our hands. The fact that it's been 3 years since that hearing and no witnesses have yet to go into a SCIF with the UAP task force and provide evidence to back their claims is concerning.
You've said that the U.S. has intact spacecraft. You said that the government has alien bodies or alien species. Have you seen the spacecraft?
I have to be careful to describe what I've seen firsthand and not in this environment, but I could answer that question behind closed doors. Yeah.
And have you seen any of the bodies?
That's something I've not witnessed myself.
The concept that an alien species that's technologically advanced enough to travel billions of light years gets here and somehow is incompetent enough to not survive Earth or crashes is something that I find a little bit far-fetched.
Regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash, n number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, as we say in the Air Force. And then in terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle.
Have they been identified that they are being produced by domestic, military and contractors? Is there any evidence that that's what's being recovered?
Not to my knowledge. Plus, the recoveries predate a lot of our advanced programs that I previously am witting of. So,
do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in public setting. The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a SCIF about.
What?
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
In what you've seen on video, did you see any source of propulsion from the flying object, including on any potential thermal scans from your aircraft?
No, there's none. There's no IR plume coming out, and Chad, who took the video, went through all the EO, which is black and white TV, and the IR modes, and there's no visible signs of propulsion. It's just sitting in space at 20,000 feet.
In your career, have you ever seen a propulsion system that creates no thermal exhaust?
No.
Can you describe how the aircraft maneuvered?
Abruptly, very determinate. It knew exactly what it was doing. It was aware of our presence, and it had acceleration rates. I mean, it went from 0 to matching our speed in no time at all.
Now, if the fastest plane on Earth was trying to do these maneuvers that you saw, would it be capable of doing that?
No, not even close.
And just to confirm, this object had no wings, correct?
No wings.
Now, was the aircraft that you were flying, was it armed?
No, never felt threatened at all.
If the aircraft was armed, do you believe that your aircraft or any aircraft in possession of the United States could have shot the Tic Tac down?
I'd say no. Just on the performance, it would have just left in a split second.
It looks like that we have a problem here that needs further investigation.
Yes.
This flying Tic Tac, I mean, is it capable of being the product of any other nation on the earth?
No, I said, like I said earlier, I think it defies current material science and the ability to develop that much propulsion. And I know there's been some physicists that have done calculations, which is beyond anything that we have. No, it's been said it's probably the most credible UFO sighting in history based on all the sensors that were tracking it, and then for us to get visual and to go against the naysayers that it's something on the screen or whatever. I mean, there's 4 sets of human eyeballs. We're all very credible. Of the 6 of us that were involved in the thing, including the video, every one of us is going to do 20 plus years in the military in very responsible positions. So I'd say the world needs to know that.
So when we think about traditional adversaries and both us towards them and them towards us, we probe their capabilities. We look for weaknesses, and we collect that data, that reconnaissance for in the event we need it in the future. For each of you, yes or no question, based off of your own experience or the data that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs could be essentially collecting reconnaissance information? Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Mr. Grusch?
Fair assessment, yeah.
Mr. Fravor?
Very possible.
Is it possible that these UAPs would be probing our capabilities? Yes or no, Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Grusch?
Yes.
Fravor?
Definitely.
Is it possible that these UAPs are testing for vulnerabilities in our current systems?
Yes.
Yes. Possible.
Do you feel, based off of your experience and the information that you've been privy to, that these UAPs provide an existential threat to the national security of the United States? Mr. Graves?
Potentially.
Yes, sir, potentially.
Same answer, potentially. Yeah, I'd say
Fravor?
definitely, potentially.
Mr. Graves and Fravor, in the event that your encounters had become hostile, would you have had the capability to defend yourself, your crew, your aircraft?
Absolutely not.
Sir?
No.
Is based off of the information that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs are interested in our nuclear technology and capabilities?
Yes.
By external observation, sure, that could be a fair assessment, yeah.
Yes.
Is there any indication that the Department of Energy is involved in UAP data collection and housing?
I don't have an answer.
I can't confirm or deny that in a public setting.
And could you do it in a secure setting?
Yes.
Mr. Fravor?
No, I don't know.
There clearly is a threat to the national security of the United States of America. As members of Congress, we have a responsibility to maintain oversight and be aware of these activities so that, if appropriate, we take action.
Sure. Do you have any personal knowledge of someone who's possibly been injured working on legacy UAP reverse engineering?
Yes.
How were they injured? Is it something like a radioactive type situation or something we didn't understand? I've heard people talk about the Havana syndrome type incidences. What was your recollection of that?
I can't get into specifics, but you could imagine assessing an unknown unknown. There's a lot of potentialities you can't fully prepare for.
Are you aware of any individuals that are participating in reverse engineering programs for non-terrestrial craft?
Personally, yes.
Do you know any that would be willing to testify if there were protections for them?
Certainly closed door and assurances that breaking their NDA, they're not going to get administratively punished for so.
Why is it that you refer to the phenomenon as non-human intelligence? Why deviate from the basis of extraterrestrial life?
I think the phenomenon is very complex, and I like to leave an open mind analytically to specific origin.
When you say specific origin, are you referring, can you elaborate on that for those that might not?
If it's a traditional extraterrestrial origin or something else that we don't quite understand from either a biological or astrophysics perspective, I just like to keep an open mind on what it could be,
You mentioned white-collar crimes potentially being taking place in regards to a cover-up. Can you please elaborate?
I have concerns based on the interviews I conducted under my official duties of potential violations of the Federal Acquisition Regulations, the FAR.
Was this the first time that you encountered a UFO or a UAP in 2004?
Yes.
And what was your general attitude or perspective on the UFO discussion before that happened?
I never felt that we were alone with all the planets out there, but I wasn't a UFO person. I wasn't watching History Channel and MUFON and all that.
And have you had experiences or encounters since that happened?
No.
And so have you formed any general conclusions about what you think you experienced then?
Yes, I think what we experienced was, like I said, well beyond the material science and the capabilities that we had at the time, that we have currently, or that we're going to have in the next 10 to 20 years.
So some of these guys, like way up high, they have no clue. They have theories, and they have probably things they can do to interact, maybe manipulate whatever this energy is, or power is, dimension is, whatever it is. I think we do have ways of interacting, but I think it's probably just beyond anything we can really comprehend. The 2024 UAP hearing had Michael Schallenberger, Mr. Gold, Mr. Elizondo, Tim Gallaudet. I think this was one of the interesting ones because we got Luis Elizondo on the record, probably not being 100% honest. What you get a lot out of this second hearing, at least what I got, I'm not going to tell you what you get, you decide for yourself. The vibe I got from this second hearing was, be afraid.
Do you solemnly swear to affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses all answered in the affirmative. The transparency of the Defense Department and the intelligence community have long been abysmal. The Pentagon has failed 6 consecutive audits. In fact, it's never actually passed one. Adding to this is a runaway overclassification of documents and materials, a reluctance to declassify materials when appropriate, and at times an outright refusal to share critical information with Congress.
Last year's hearing was a great example of open dialogue about UAPs, and we must remain committed to sharing information with the American people. When the American people and members of Congress ask, are reports of UAPs credible, we're met with stonewalling. We're met with responses of, I can't tell you. And in fact, we're met with people not wanting us to have hearings. We're met with people not wanting us to ask you questions. In fact, many of us were told not to ask some of you certain questions on certain topics. We know there are advanced technology programs. Almost 15 years ago, one of those came out of Area 51 to go after Osama bin Laden. And the only reason we know about that is because one of those helicopters was downed. As we get into a new administration, the president-elect has talked about opportunities to declassify information on UAPs, and I hope he lives up to that promise.
And I would now, committee staff asked me to go ahead and I will do it, to enter into the congressional record this 12-page document that Michael Schallenberger brought today that describes the Immaculate Constellation government program. So we will do that now. Every member up here has a copy of it. The first section talks about the unacknowledged special access program called Immaculate Constellation, and the second section about USG imagery intelligence. And Representative Luna just told me if I say Immaculate Constellation, I'll be on some list, maybe a FISA warrant. So come at me, bro, I guess. But without objection, entered in the record.
Confirmation that UAPs are real came to me in January of 2015 when I was serving as the commander of the Navy Meteorology and Oceanography Command. At the time, my personnel were participating in a pre-deployment naval exercise off the U.S. East Coast. During this exercise, I received an email on Navy's secure network from the operations officer of U.S. Fleet Forces Command. The email was addressed to all the subordinate commanders, and the subject line read in all capital letters, urgent safety of flight issue. The text of the email was brief but alarming, with words to the effect, "If any of you know what these are, tell me ASAP. We are having multiple near mid-air collisions, and if we do not resolve this soon, we are going to have to shut down the exercise." Attached to the email is what is now known as the Go Fast video, captured on the forward-looking infrared sensor of one of the Navy F-A-18 aircraft participating in the exercise. The now declassified video showed an unidentified object exhibiting flight and structural characteristics unlike anything in our arsenal. The implication of the email was clear. The author was asking whether any of the recipients were aware of classified technology demonstrations that could explain these objects. Because the DoD policy is to rigorously deconflict such demonstrations with live exercises, I was confident this was not the case. The very next day, that email disappeared from my account and those of the other recipients without explanation. This lack of follow-up was very concerning to me. As the Navy's chief meteorologist at the time, I was responsible for reducing safety of flight risks. Yet it appeared to me that no one at the flag officer level was addressing the safety risk posed by UAPs. I concluded that the UAP information must have been classified within a special access program managed by an intelligence agency. That is a compartmented program that even senior officials, including myself, were not read into. Last year's UAP hearing before this oversight committee confirmed that UAP-related information is being withheld from senior officials and members of Congress. Last year's UAP hearing also revealed that elements of the government are engaged in a disinformation campaign to include personal attacks designed to discredit UAP whistleblowers. Continued overclassification surrounding UAPs has not only hindered our ability to effectively address these phenomena, but has also eroded trust in our institutions. A more comprehensive approach is needed to address the broader implication of UAP on public safety and national security, as well as the socio-economic opportunities that open UAP research could unlock. Therefore, I recommend Congress take the following action, which I believe will receive bipartisan support. First, establish robust oversight of the executive branch's management of UAP information by directing key officials, beginning with the director of the DoD's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, to provide comprehensive briefings on what the government knows about UAP and does not know. Two, enact the provisions of the UAP Disclosure Act that establish a UAP Records Review Board to ensure independent oversight, transparency, and accountability in the government's handling of UAP information. And three, strengthen the UAP Disclosure Act and future reauthorizations with provisions that mandate a whole-of-government approach to addressing UAP. In closing, I will share my personal reasons for speaking out on this topic. Now that we know UAP are interacting with humanity, and these include unidentified submerged objects in the ocean, we should not turn a blind eye, but instead boldly face this new reality and learn from it.
So if you were in our shoes, where would you go from here? How would you get that information? A lot of times we just don't know who to ask because we don't know where to go next. So if you were in our shoes, where would you go?
Well, I prefer to answer that question in a closed session. However, we established AARO for that very purpose, and unfortunately, under its previous leadership, it failed. Aware of the reporting that biologics have been recovered. Again, my focus was more nuts and bolts, looking at the physical aspects of these phenomena, how they interacted around military equities and nuclear equities. So I'm certainly not a medical expert. I would not be able to probably provide you a whole lot of value in that simply because I don't have the expertise.
But was anything described as that we have possession of bodies?
Yes.
We have is it multiple types of creatures or?
Sir, I couldn't answer that. I can tell you anecdotally that it was discussed quite a bit when I was at the Pentagon. The problem is the supposed collection of these biological samples occurred before my time, in fact, before I was even born.
And was this part of the Lockheed Martin discussion, or was this the biologics is a completely separate?
Separate yet related.
Okay. Has there been to your knowledge, any communication with a non-human life form?
So the term communication is a bit of a trick word because there's verbal communication like we're having now. The problem is you also have nonverbal communication. And so I would say definitively yes, but from a nonverbal meaning, when a Russian reconnaissance aircraft comes into U.S. airspace, we scramble two F-22s, and we are certainly communicating intent and capability. Certainly there seems to be some indication that they're being provocative, meaning that they're, in some cases, literally splitting aircraft formations right down the middle. So that's an air safety issue.
Seems that a lot of these sightings occur near military installations. Do you think that
these UAPs are intentionally targeting military installations, or do you think that we have increased abilities to monitor surrounding the military installations?
Even if there was a 2% chance that there was some sort of hostile intent here, that's 2% higher than we really can accept. And so we must figure out, there's a calculus, capabilities versus intent, in order to identify if something is a national security threat. We've seen some of the capabilities, yet we have no idea in the intent. And so this is why this discussion is somewhat, I think, problematic from a governmental perspective, because we have no idea.
I mean, it seems that they're becoming increasingly brash, and the question that we really have to figure out is it China or is it non-human? And I think that's the biggest question the American people want to know. If it's China, it's scary because they have a lot of technology that we cannot explain. And if it's non-human, that's scary because we don't know the intent.
I really believe that we should use this hearing as a catalyst to improve and bolster our air defense capabilities and our maritime domain awareness capabilities, because obviously there are holes in it, whether it be UAP of non-H.I direction or N.H.I direction, or as you say, sir, China or any other adversary. From 2020 to 2022, there was a UAP task force in the DoD succeeding where Mr. Elizondo worked, led by Jay Stratton, who had the first comprehensive whole-of-government approach to UAP, which involved pathways to declassification and to increase transparency, as well as assessing the national security risks of UAP. This was a really well-established approach, and we have all advocated that something like it return.
Law enforcement, military do not have authorities to actually engage, and Congress needs to act to give those authorities to local law enforcement and the military, so they have clear guidelines on how to assess these issues going forward.
I would support classification necessary to protect secrets essential to national security, but I think it's pretty obvious that there's overclassification. President-elect Trump has repeatedly committed to greater transparency, both on the UAP issue, on JFK files, on COVID origins, and many other things. So I think that we need to make sure that the next administration is held accountable for that.
Within the Department of Defense, involving the manipulation of human genetics with what is described as non-human genetic material, potentially for the enhancement of human capabilities, hybrids. Are any of you familiar with that? Yes or no?
No, ma'am.
I am not, ma'am.
I'm not.
No, ma'am.
Yeah, the Immaculate Constellation covers both terrestrial and oceanic, and there's actually a number of cases described in the report that occur in the ocean.
And do you believe that there is a concerted effort by the Pentagon to keep Congress out of the loop regarding these UAP activities, specifically in our waters?
Yes.
So are there any accounts of UAPs emerging from or submerging into our water, which could indicate a base or presence beneath the ocean's surface?
I don't know about a base, but as I mentioned, I had a different source entirely describe this pretty extraordinary footage that exists of orbs, of an orb coming out of the ocean and being met by another orb.
Mr. Elizondo, were you read into the Immaculate Constellation program?
I would not be authorized to confirm nor deny the existence of any ongoing or past program, especially as it relates to a special access program, either by name or trigraph. We do work with international partners and allies quite often, not just in military exercises and workups, but in other intelligence efforts as well. Lockheed Martin and others do quite a bit of work both in our atmosphere, in space, and even underwater. There are certain efforts.
There are debunkers out there who have said the Go Fast video was just a balloon. That was only one video that was released. There were dozens of these encounters that pilots and friends of Ryan Graves, who's in this room right here, witnessed and caused significant safety concerns.
Mr. Schellenberger, how do we get more whistleblowers to come forward?
Well, this hearing is very important, and obviously, I can't encourage whistleblowers to obtain information, but I can guarantee that I will protect them and go to prison to protect their identities.
How would you define non-human biologics, non-human intelligence? What are we actually talking about? Admiral, and we'll go down the line.
I don't think it's a stretch when you look at the diversity of life on this planet and the size of this universe to think that there would be more diverse, higher order, non-human intelligences throughout the universe, and that's probably what's visiting us.
I would take the scientific approach. The definition would be the ability to react to a stimulus in a manner that requires an intellectual thought process?
I just don't know.
I think we must be modest in our assumptions that we're looking for intelligence. That could be biological, it might not.
Non-biological, but what non-biological intelligence, what does that mean though?
Artificial intelligence, ML, machines. We assume that all intelligence would be like us, and every time we look out in the universe, we are humbled relative to what we don't know in terms of the forms of intelligence and what it may take. I can assure you I probably can't ask you your question, but I think the ultimate answer is going to surprise us all.
I think we all know that there's something going on. Mr. Elizondo, based on your knowledge of UAP sightings, do you believe it's fair to say that they are especially common near nuclear sites?
Yes, sir. Mr. Congressman, I absolutely am convinced of that, as are my colleagues inside the government.
Do you believe they've caused an irregular activity, and why might they be interested in those sites?
Sir, in some cases, it's actually regular activity. You'd be surprised. There's actually documentation right now that's been submitted. It's not just Oak Ridge. It's Savannah River Site, SRS. It's also Los Alamos. A lot of our sensitive R&D locations appear to be under some sort of surveillance and monitoring. Why? Well, because a lot of innovation comes out of those areas. A lot of new technologies, a lot of, if you will, disruptive technologies that we use for our national defense originates out of those locations, and advanced concepts in physics as well. So if I was doing any type of reconnaissance, even on a foreign adversary, that's a great target to start with.
What role might the Department of Energy or its subsidiaries or affiliates have in this type of technology, or possessing this type of technology, whether it's ours or others?
Absolutely. They were threatening Navy pilots during the exercise that I was, my people were involved with in 2015, and it's my understanding they're risking pilot safety, commercial and military today.
So I think it's reasonable to conclude that if there is a threat to our personnel who are serving our country faithfully, that there be oversight.
100%, Congressman. And in fact, that's the one thing that we've not talked about enough during this hearing, is the fact that the government, the executive branch, not sharing with Congress what it knows about UAP infringes on your legislative and oversight responsibilities to such an extent that's very concerning. I mean, what else are we, if you look at national security or intelligence or foreign affairs or appropriations, you all have oversight and legislative responsibility regarding those. This UAP issue may be the greatest issue of our time, and it's being hid from you.
My concern, whether this technology emanates from us or otherworldly, that we know that we possess it. And where's the accountability? Where are the stopgaps? What are the guarantees that if this were to fall in enemy hands, that it isn't immediately weaponized against us? And I'll say this, it is clear from my experience and what I've seen that there is something out there. The question is it ours? Is it someone else's? Or is it otherworldly? And Madam Chairman, I would posit that as the legislative body, as the regulatory body, we must know. And anyone who prevents us from gaining access to that information, I would consider that criminality. Because we have U.S. personnel who may very well be in harm's way. We have technology that ultimately may threaten our very existence.
This is some kind of a psychological operation that's completely controlled by the government or by some organization within the government. They have these senators by the balls. Now, these are the identifiers. Okay, these are things you need to look for. It doesn't mean if you see one of these things in statements or conversations or meetings or whatever, it doesn't mean that's what's going on. It's just like anything else. These are little data points. So a couple of these, okay, if a couple of these make you feel that way and you interpret it that way, okay. If almost all of them are checked off, then you may have a problem. You may be recognizing that there's a psyop literally going on in your sphere, right? Like, it's happening and you are identifying it. And that's a good thing. You can't stop it. Like, we're not going to be in a position where we can stop this from happening. But we can identify it, and we can learn how to react to it appropriately so we don't get swept up into it. Does it emotionally affect you? That is a huge one. Why are you so upset about something that really, when you think about it, at the end of the day, will have zero impact on your personal life? Does it emotionally impact you? Do they hide details from the case? Like, why would you do that? Why would you not tell us the whole kit and caboodle, right? Does it benefit someone powerful? I mean, that's a big one, right? As we choose where to get our news from and what news to believe, who's the person behind that, right? Like, who wants you to receive that message and wants you to feel that way, and how would they benefit from it? If the channel you're watching is a so-called news channel, and it's constant fear, and then it cuts to commercial, and there's a drug for this, there's a drug for that, there's a drug for this. That's benefiting someone, right? If there's a challenging question, is that silenced? Are you made to feel like some kind of nosy asshole because you have a legitimate question about an issue? That's weird. Does the message seem to repeat everywhere all at once? Oh, 100% that happens. We have seen that happen. And then if it's challenged, do any of the facts change? Because facts are not supposed to change, right? Like, facts are supposed to be facts. Again, you tie this in with the previous list, okay? So if you're seeing these things, react before you think, emotional hijacked, everyone suddenly using the same phrase, anonymous accounts repeating the same story, manufactured urgency, shrinking acceptable opinions. That's a big one, right? Like, how come we used to be able to talk about this and now the conversation has changed to that? You literally see this happening in this field. So you add those with these. If you've got a lot of check marks, don't panic. Just be proud of yourself. Pat yourself on the back, because you're halfway there. You've identified what it is, and maybe we don't know what it is they're trying to do, but we can certainly do things to try to protect ourselves. And it doesn't take a lot. It's a very short list. Slow down. All right, that's the first thing. Slow down. There's not a rush. Check the source. Do you trust the source? Is it a good source? Is it credible? Are there facts that back the opinion? Again, look for incentives. Who's going to benefit from this? You want to compare different viewpoints. That's why a lot of times if I'm covering the news, you'll notice like at one point Fox News will be on, at another point CNN will be on, at another point MSNBC. My favorite is C-SPAN. They seem to be the most objective. But I mean, you're going to get viewpoints that are kind of aligned with whatever network you're going to be watching. That's just the world that we live in. So compare them. What makes sense to you? A lot of times the truth is right in the middle, right? It's not always black and white. A lot of times it's in the gray area. The main thing is, and the reason I rewound it, is don't let fear decide. If you're afraid, if there's fear, that needs to be addressed. What are you afraid of? And why is this fear there? Is it legitimate? And if so, that's a whole nother can of worms. So slow down. Your mind is your firewall. And then simply verify what you amplify. Right? If you believe something very strongly, you're posting about it, you're trying to convince other people there's something to it, do your homework. Make sure you're sure. Because if you're not sure, look, we all make mistakes. That's one thing. And we have to be pliable, right? Like we have to be able to adapt and adjust and accept different viewpoints. You can't be so emotionally evolved that you're not willing to change your viewpoint, even if the fact is smacking you, right in the face. You read something, you hear something, you watch something, you feel that. Take a pause. We're going to check our other viewpoints. We're going to see who benefits from the actions. And we're going to restrain from breaking news, right? Before we gather the facts. Because that's how misinformation gets spread. It gets spread because of speed. People want to be the first person to deliver that message, to break that story, to break that news. And of course, you're going to want to do that, especially if you're in the journalism field. But most journalists have this rule, like unless they can source, unless they can get a confirmation, some kind of independent confirmation of the story that they're going with, they don't go with it. In the social media world, we just have to hear it and we can repeat it and anything can go viral.
The U.S. government had nothing to do with whatever it is you saw.
Correct.
They wouldn't want it there because it would potentially interrupt the proceedings at the time. Was there an after action? Was there a discussion by your command was there an investigation? It's pretty significant activities that you were involved in. Was there an investigation that you know of?
We conducted investigations in real time.
Right.
And we document all the evidence, but as far as anything from higher up, I don't know if there was an investigation done. No information came down on what we should do.
Were you ever interviewed at someone else's request?
About that incident?
Yeah, about the incident.
I don't believe so. So the historical record has laid out that there's a pattern, that our installations are visited by these craft. They come in and do whatever they're doing, and then they leave. And we don't know how to respond. We don't know how to protect the installation. So that's why we're here. There'd be 40, 60, 100 people on duty during these encounters.
Really?
Yeah.
All seeing it at the same time?
Yes, these encounters were playing out while we were on duty, and we were responding and investigating in real time as they occurred.
And as you said, the importance of your operation was highly important because they said it's the most important in 25 years. the research that you were conducting?
For that particular launch, we had 500 Air Force police officers guarding the launch.
How big? Wise?
The two square objects were at least as large as a football field. The second encounter, they think it was much larger than a football field. We're talking like flying buildings. My next move, I went into my house after it left. I made sure no one had been abducted, and I picked up the landline. I called the Security Forces Command Center. The object I saw, I don't even know if it was an object. It was a light. It was an orb. It didn't look like a craft, but it did look solid. Someone would see a light. They would pay attention to the light. And then the object responds. It performs for you. And then they come down and they investigate you. So it's almost like they're curious.
It was very concerning because in my Aero MFR, they had actually referenced a former staff member that was the one who told me to go there, and they probably shouldn't have done that.
How important, given everything that you've seen and experienced, is the UAP Disclosure Act of 2025 in restoring both public accountability and trust?
I think very important. I would hope, though, that the 7-year window could be shrunk, my opinion, but very important. The truth needs to be known.
So this is now the second or third committee where we have former military folks with impeccable records, with information and knowledge. And so I don't really know what is true. I don't know on this subject. But I do know when we're being lied to. And we are definitely being lied to. There's just no doubt about that. What you were looking at was a weapons program that you were unaware of, or did you think what you were looking at was obviously some extraterrestrial piece of technology?
Neither one of those crossed my mind. It was just...
How about now? What do you think it is now?
I'm not the expert. I think I want to be as skeptical as everyone else and just hope to know the information.
Anyone in the U.S. government tell you what you were looking at to try to dissuade you from what you thought it was?
No.
So no one was like, oh, there was some anomaly with the technology. No one from the government did that?
No one.
Someone's lying about something. Someone's hiding something, right? That's not normal what you looked at. So it's either a weapons program being reverse engineered by our governments or other governments, or it's nobody's government, and it's not from here. Those are it. You agree with that assessment?
I agree. One or the other.
I think that, in your opinion, that the equilateral triangle was the U.S. government's technology?
I did once upon a time, but knowing what I know now, I'll have to answer that question in a SCIF probably.
My next question is, you teased us, so knowing what you know now means what?
I know enough to know that if you want an answer to that question, go to Aero.
Strategic absence of evidence and verifiable details. So every time there's a shocking claim, we're told, wait for the SCIF. And here we are, nearly 3 years later, waiting for the SCIF.
Okay, you said in your testimony earlier with the chairwoman, you know other things. I guess that has to be mentioned in a SCIF.
It would.
The other things.
It would, pending I'm even legally allowed to speak on, and the people in the room are even legally allowed to hear it.
That's right. They compartmentalize the information. Only certain people know the name of the program, and if you don't know it, you can't get the information. If you don't have the name, you don't know what to ask for. Is it a way for the government to hide from Congress what's really going on and where the money's going?
In my opinion, absolutely yes.
Do you think that any of this is a psyop by the U.S. government?
Entirely possible. I mean, our government and other governments have admitted that they've tried to use UFOs to cover secret projects.
And that's what disgusts me about this whole thing. I think they're just trying to run the clock out on us, really. They'll poke us a little and they'll make jokes to us and try to pull us off the target, but I think we know where we're at. And that's why they're firing at us, because we are over the target.
I think you got to unleash the dogs and go track down the money and where it goes, because a lot of this stuff has been moved out of government.
Sure.
As you know, Rep. Burchett, it's been given to private contractors who've stashed it away. They've had it for so long that there's nobody left inside government, or very few, who know where it is.
And they do that to keep us from FOIA, correct?
Yeah, it's to keep it from FOIA. And I think that the contractors who've had this stuff for a very long time set their own standards about who is allowed to know what. And it's a very small group that ever cracks that. I think Representative Luna has been looking at the use of classifications to hide things. I'm not sure that even this committee getting security clearances that should allow you to see this stuff would allow you to follow where it really goes. I don't think they've made much progress in learning that technology. Might have made some, but you wonder, the implication is Tic Tac. Oh yeah, that's ours. What flew over Washington, D.C. in '52, is that ours too? When are you going to break that out? You guys authorized tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars on weapon systems that can't do half of what we've seen UFOs do. So when do they break this out? If it's really a classified project, could change the world. I don't think they've made much progress, and I think they've been lying to us and to you and the rest of the world, and they're still doing it. I met with these officials who, during that time period, glasnost, perestroika, the Russians were trying to open up to the world, and I saw it as a window of opportunity, and it was. And we were able to talk these folks into providing us information that otherwise we would never have seen. Some of that was classified. I found out that they only stamped the top pages of these documents that were classified, so I just removed them. I removed those pages and I carried them out. And if they'd caught me, I'd be in a gulag still. The Russian physicist who had helped us introduced all these people wrote back and said there was a huge eruption, that there was the real right, far autocratic forces that wanted a return of the USSR had really go after these guys. They described them as traitors. Nikolai Kapranov, the physicist friend of mine, said, look, if this had happened 5 years earlier, we would be in prison. If it had happened 10 years earlier, we would have been shot. Right. Luckily, at that point, Putin was not in power, but none of those people that we talked to on that trip in 1993 would ever talk to me again. And I can tell you, you'll see those files that I shared with you, they did find stuff. There was an incident in October of 1982 over at ICBM base where UFOs popped up, was observed over this base where the missiles are pointed at us, United States. These UFOs perform incredible maneuvers. They split apart, they fuse back together, they'd appear and disappear. And right at the end of this 4-hour period, the launch control codes for the ICBMs lit up. Something entered the correct codes. The missiles were fired up and ready to launch, and they could not shut it down. The Russian officers were panicking. The UFOs they disappeared. The launch control system goes back to normal. Colonel Sokolov and his team came in, took the thing apart, could not figure out what it was. It wasn't a power surge or EMPs or some of the baloney excuses that our country has given for similar events involving our nuclear missiles. They thought it was a message from wherever the UFOs were from. And that's a chilling thing. I mean, we were a couple of seconds away from World War III starting, and the UFOs were responsible for it.
Just last night, I tried to get an amendment onto the National Defense Authorization Act that fit in the germaneness of that bill to have UAP disclosure. And conveniently, it was named non-germane, mostly deemed by staff, not even an elected official. This is the kind of stuff that we repeatedly see. Last year, we were blocked by someone in House administration from being able to receive a full briefing from Arrow. So not an elected official, but someone in staff blocked us. And I've had it. Enough is enough. This was taken October 30th of 2024. This video is of an MQ-9 drone tracking an orb, or this object, off the coast of Yemen. You'll see that another MQ-9 launched a Hellfire missile. That you cannot see that drone. And so I'm not going to explain it to you. You'll see exactly what it does. This is when it zoomed out, so you can still see it traveling. So, Mr. Knapp, have you heard about, events like this occurring? And what information might you have?
I have heard about events like this. I have heard about this event. Jeremy Corbell and I talked about it in one of our episodes a while back. Occasionally some of that stuff gets out in the wild and it comes our way. It should be going to you. The public should be seeing this stuff.
And you had, you reported James Lakatsky came to you with government possession of N.H.I. craft and how they ultimately gained entry. Can you testify to the veracity of that claim?
Dr. Lakatsky is an honorable man who served most of his career with the DIA, a very trusted, high-level rocket scientist and intelligence analyst who inspired the OSAP program, as I said earlier. And in full disclosure, I've co-written 2 books with him. He dropped this on myself and our other co-author out of the blue. And
test of various components of a UFO, UAP, paranormal research program. Right from the beginning, it included all aspects of both UFOs and the paranormal in relationship to UFOs. That occurred let's say in a congressional facility.
You told us, because you were allowed to tell us, that our government has a UFO in its possession and has been able to access the inside of it, right?
Yes. It makes
why is it delicate?
Described in here look primitive.
The devil is in the details. So when you have Jim Lakatsky doing an interview, you have to pay extra special attention to what it is he's exactly saying, what it is he's exactly committing to. Or maybe they have some kind of agreement. I mean, we've heard multiple folks talk about agreements between certain alien extraterrestrial races and certain governments or certain powerful groups of people. I know it sounds crazy, but this whole topic can get a bit crazy, right? If there's truth to the legacy program, good people were hurt. Like, really good people were hurt. And what we do know, just as a fact, is that emotionally, professionally, people were absolutely hurt just by our own intelligence agency. We know this. I get confused when we put some of these intelligence agencies on these pedestals. Like, what are you talking about? They're the greatest. Well, look, I think the CIA is probably the greatest in the world at what they do, probably. But they shouldn't be doing it to us. Like, we were supposed to be off limits. The CIA isn't even supposed to be able to operate in the United States. But guess what? They do. They do. Clear as day, they barely try to hide it. And Psyops to the CIA is a second language. We know that. If you've hung out with me, watched my channel, watched any of my videos, we know that. We know what that group of folks is capable of. So yeah, I get upset when I think about legacy programs and people that were hurt, lied to, manipulated, lives that were ruined. It really upsets me because what they were doing, I could understand if at first it was like, hey, let's not freak people out until we get our arms around this, until we have our bearings, and probably would agree with that statement at the time. Like, if I was one of the decision makers back then, I probably would have said the same thing. Let's just see what we can figure out first. Like, if we know absolutely nothing, let's see what information we can find out first so as to limit the panic. And Mr. Gold tells Nancy Mace in one of these hearings, yeah, there could be a non-biological, non-human intelligence, and that would be AI. And they refer to the Immaculate Constellation leak thanks to Matthew Brown, who I still regard as somewhat of a hero for doing what he did. I know people don't agree with me. I know people I even have on this show don't agree with me, but that's okay. It's okay to have a disagreement. I believe what Matthew Brown did was heroic. I think he saw something important. He wanted to let the world know, in particular our country know, that there's this whole nother realm out there and that we are being sheltered from it. Maybe the government thinks it's doing the right thing, but we are being told it's raining while they are pissing on our shoes.
It took 14 months for us to get Dopser approval for him to release 2 sentences on that. He said this craft, we had managed to get inside of it. It had no wings, no rotor, no tail. It had no fuel tanks. They didn't know how it flew or how it was operated. It clearly looked like it was aerodynamic, but he would not go further. He's a by-the-book guy, and until he gets clearance to say more about that, I don't think we're going to hear much more. But it's not ours. It wasn't ours. We didn't make it. We didn't know who made it and how it was built and how it operated. We've got at least one.
One of the big questions, I think, for many of us is why do you believe that the federal government refuses to be transparent about this issue?
I think there's probably multiple reasons. At the start, when these things first started invading our skies in large numbers, we were scared. It was right after World War II, and we didn't know what they were, and they didn't want to panic the public, and that was probably a good call. Over time, I think the lying sort of became institutionalized, you know?
A letter I sent to the DOD regarding the case of Major David Charles Grusch, a UAP whistleblower who's been extremely helpful to this committee. Unfortunately, due to his participation in the disclosure of UAP, he suffered reprisal like the removal of his clearance, denial of promotion, and loss of medical retirement. I wrote the DOD on July 24th, 2025 on behalf of Major Grusch, and I'm still waiting for a reply. I appreciate any help the committee can offer to get a response.
The keepers of the secrets, the private companies that have been doing this job for intelligence agencies for a long time, are not going to cough it up. You'd have to force it out of them. And whether you can get them to admit that they have it or not, I mean, they're supposed to lie about it. They've been lying about it. You know, I more power to you. I hope it works. I hope it passes this time. But it's a daunting challenge to get them to open up after lying about it for more than 75 years. I think about Arrow, the organization that this body created to deal with witnesses and whistleblowers. I hope I'm not taking too much of your time here, but they invited people to come forward, service members who saw things and had experiences. And I can tell you that the people that I have talked to who went through that are deeply disappointed. There was a guy named Bob Jacobs who was a lieutenant attached to Vandenberg in 1964. His unit would record missile tests. They recorded all of them. On one of these particular tests, a UFO comes out of nowhere, zaps what looks like a laser beam at what would have been a nuclear dummy, a nuclear weapon, and disabled it. And he is called into the commander's office. 2 guys in suits clip that film footage out that shows the UFO, and he's ordered to never talk about it. He comes forward to Arrow. He heeds the call, thinking he's doing his duty as an American to tell that story, and they completely dismissed him. They made up a story that they had tracked down the original footage, and there was nothing like that in it. Well, there was no original footage. It had been taken away the day the footage was recorded. He's deeply disappointed. People like Bob Salas, who had worked at a nuclear ICBM base, who saw UFOs flying over the base, and these missile silos were taken down. He went to Arrow, too, and was completely disregarded. It almost looks like Arrow operated as a counterintelligence operation to get people to come in, tell their stories, and then discredit all of them.
Really dig deep into Arrow, and I would encourage us.
Oh, I'd be happy to send maybe a subpoena to Mr. Kilpatrick.
There you go. Manipulation of message, manipulation of narrative. That is really the problem with this entire the system that we've seen.
Are any of you willing to name specific gatekeepers within the root cell of the UAP SAP Federation?
You mean specific people and contractors that have dealt with us and kept the secret?
Specific individuals.
Well, one of them was named Dr. James Ryder at Lockheed. But, you know, again, to emphasize, I don't fault these contractors for doing what they were asked to do by our government. They're supposed to lie if people ask about it. And the intelligence agencies who gave this stuff to them, CIA, I think primarily, told them to keep it quiet. And they've done that. And I suspect that they'd like an off-ramp. That they'd like some help with figuring out this technology at some point.
And this is, again, available to anyone, is there a security classification guide for UAP or N.H.I?
I remember in the 2003 or 2023 hearing, it was stated that all UAP related material is classified secret or above.
I have a name for you.
Go ahead.
Glenn Gaffney, CIA.
Glenn Gaffney, CIA.
And I think if we could get some of these accused legacy program folks, that would be even more interesting. I think what we would hear is a lot of pleading of the fifth, unless for some reason they wanted to voluntarily testify, like they woke up one night and decided they had a conscience and cared about people and things and stuff and didn't want to hurt people anymore. That'd be great.
You know, the question is, and I posed it in one of the previous hearings, is it ours, is it theirs, or is it otherworldly? There may not be a silver bullet at the moment, but when you look back through the hearing and the evidence that's been presented, if you're going to point the American people to one piece of evidence to start their journey on this topic, what would you suggest, sir?
If just the average person here in America looked at absolutely everything that has come across television, the internet, etc., you can't tell yourself that 100% of what's being recorded is fake or false. You have to, at some point, understand that there's something else out there.
I think this latest video from Mr. Burleson is something that should get everyone pause. When you see the three orbs that drop, was that in a defensive posture or was that in an offensive posture? And what capabilities did those orbs have that we, quite frankly, may not have? Mr. Knapp?
As I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks, what hooked me on the story was the paper trail, these documents that shouldn't exist. We've been told for decades, over and over, there's nothing to it. It's not a threat. You can go about your business. And then when FOIA becomes the law of the land, thousands of pages to the contrary leak out. We don't know where they're from. I don't know anyone who knows the answer for sure. They call them aliens just as a placekeeper kind of a word, but no one in all these programs who've studied this stuff for years, people with much bigger brains than mine, knows the answer for sure.
I just think that's we're scratching at something that we don't have any knowledge of, and that's why it's just taken so dadgum long. But they do know, first one that cracks that code, it's over. I mean, it's energy, it's power, it's everything. And I worry too that in the wrong hands that they do that, they keep it from the rest of us because they're so invested in whatever energy sources we have here that their billionaire buddies are going to profit, and they can't retool because they know once it's out on the internet, it's over.
I hope that you all see that we're committed to this. And we're going to be scrappy about it. We may not have the direct authority, but I can assure you Representative Luna is about as scrappy as it gets. I wouldn't want to scrap with her. But that being said, I think that if the American people want to see answers, we need to action. We've had the hearings. It's time to take action. It's time that we pass Tim Burchett's Whistleblower Act. It's time that we pass the UAP Disclosure Act. And I think that we've had a lot of talk about this. It's time for action.
These hearings, what we're looking at is, are the hearings functioning as narrative control and a narrative operation, intentionally or opportunistically designed to steer public attention to protect programs and really control what questions get asked? The reality is the UAPDA failed, and we have no oversight. So we now have the same oversight on UFOs as we had in 2017 when the New York Times article with Leslie Kean that really sparked just a ton of interest in this subject came out. Multiple hearings, thousands of declassified papers, probably hundreds of declassified videos and photos at this point. But we couldn't get 8 civilians with clearance to provide some kind of oversight that can demand the data that we will need to uncover what we're dealing with. So right now, this government of the people, by the people, and for the people is not working for the people. And we're not even sure if it's of the people. A lot of them say the right things, but then when it comes time to vote, it's quite the opposite. Were these hearings bullshit? In other words, were they created as some part of a narrative? Were they shaped and manipulated and molded into what they were because that is what certain folks wanted us to see? All 3 of these main hearings, so hearing 1 and hearing 2, George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell without a frickin' tie, I don't know why that bugs me so much, I really don't, are sitting in the front rows for hearing 1 and hearing 2. In fact, there are moments in hearing 1 and hearing 2 where witnesses turn around and speak to George Knapp and or Jeremy Corbell. And in this very last hearing that just took place, it was essentially the George Knapp show. I don't have a beef with George Knapp. I love George Knapp. I think he's great. But I do find it very interesting of the, oh boy, probably thousands of folks that are still alive that probably have more knowledge about these programs. Not a single one of them came forward. It was George Knapp in the front row with Jeremy Corbell, episode 1, episode 2, and then for the finale, this most recent one, it's all George Knapp. The UAPDA, once it was attached to the NDAA, was free from scrutiny. And there never was a clean version of the UAPDA that went through. There never was a version that went through that included the Oversight Committee. Not once. It got through twice, both times completely gutted. First time, totally gutted. Second time, gutted even more. Third time, this most recent time, the 2025 NDAA, completely slashed. We lost. Why do you think Colonel Nell was on a video on their National Disclosure Day at the New Paradigm Institute saying disclosure's dead? Because he felt defeated after all of the effort and messaging he put out there. That if we don't get this oversight, if these people don't get this kind of oversight and access, this is going to continue to get away from us and be out of reach from us. And it's going to run free with no oversight and zero accountability. Look, y'all, there's already enough bad things that happen with accountability. Now imagine having access to whatever technology is there and having no oversight. It's dangerous. It's something you should care about. The only hope we have is a standalone UAP Disclosure Act. So call your representative. You want a standalone UAP Disclosure Act that includes a civilian oversight committee. Because if we don't get that, the UFO topic, truth, disclosure, is not going to advance. Before we know it, another 20 years will go by. Maybe some new technology catches another crazy looking thing. And we'll have to go through all this silliness again because we couldn't get it right this time. The very first UAP hearing only had 3 witnesses. It had David Grusch, Ryan Graves, and David Fravor. But it was also probably some of the most compelling testimony. We did hear from George Knapp and James Lukatsky, even though they put it in a book. It's different when you hear it under oath that the U.S. government found a UFO, cracked one open, and accessed the inside of it. There was no means of propulsion, no wings, no nothing. But somehow this thing was moving, flying around. What that means, don't know. But those are the facts they were willing to release. That's incredible. And we got that under oath from Dr. Jim Lukatsky. So that's important. And they are working on getting even more information out. So I'm happy for that. Like, the more we can get out, the better. Hopefully it's not all bullshit. But if it's official, it's official. That's the thing. Like, you can call the DIRDs crazy. You can call the whole Bass research project crazy. But Dr. Lukaski said it the best, I think, is that, look, this is what the CIA, the Air Force wanted. This is by request. They wanted studies on this. Where am I at with the Psyop? I'm at, do I think these hearings were a Psyop? No. But do I think they're getting influenced by people to try to turn it into a Psyop? Yeah. You hear the congressman himself say in one of these hearings, they're told certain questions not to ask. That's highly irregular before a hearing on the House, for some staffer to come up to you and say, hey, you probably shouldn't ask him about this. Excuse me? That's probably, I mean, who I am, that's probably the first thing I'm going to go and ask for after that happens. But I'm just saying, that's highly irregular. So these are all very interesting data points all across the board. Take it for what you will, but take it nonetheless. To passing that information on privately and in a SCIF. And to date, in this mid-December of 2025, not a single one of these witnesses or whistleblowers, whatever nomenclature you want to give them, has actually come forward and sat in a SCIF with these lawmakers, including David Grusch, who is now on the UAP task force. The UAPDA failed, and that means any real oversight failed, and that means we've made essentially zero progress in the last 3-4 years. And since 2017, we've kind of made negative process because Arrow has proceeded to get things on the record that state none of this is weird. All normal stuff. People are just misinterpreting what they're seeing in the skies. I believe what we're going to see going forward, at least for the next little while, are going to be new leaks timed around legislation or elections. We're going to hear a lot more about SCIF talk, and we're going to see a lot of the same, no SCIF results. We're going to hear a lot of talk about going into these SCIFs and getting this data to our leadership, but it's not going to happen. The framing it as a threat is going to continue to intensify as no new information comes out about what we're dealing with. And I think we're already seeing it, this kind of slow shift from craft to drone. And we're seeing from drone to foreign actors, depending on what politician is saying it and what they're talking about. So this is being framed already, if you haven't noticed. We're going to close this segment out on this. These are some questions I would like to ask myself of the UAP task force. Number one, if this is real, why is public evidence always lagging behind claims? Why do we get dramatic testimony but no auditable documentation? Why does the narrative drift depending on political climate? Who controls the funnel of what becomes known? What would accountability look like if this story was true? And then if it's not true, who's benefiting from all of this confusion? We know in a Psyop, confusion is a tool, not an accident. So who's benefiting from the confusion this is causing if this is all bullshit? Because the claims are either the biggest claims in human history or the most sophisticated narrative operation ever run on the public. Things we've seen in common in these hearings: an emphasis on national security language, repeated use of "I can't discuss that publicly," or "we'll have to discuss that in a SCIF," or "it depends on if I can even get the clearance to say that," or "you can get the clearance to even hear that." These are our elected officials. High impact claims paired with low public verifiability. We have UFOs. We have non-biologics. Where are they? We don't know. If we do know, we'll have to share that with you in a SCIF. Urgency, 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 and no deliverables. Time is running out. We need action. But nothing happens. Nothing gets through. And in fact, even in the early days in 2023, when the UAP Disclosure Act got through by being attached to the NDAA, it was completely gutted. There was no oversight panel. There was nothing. It was just a bill that basically said, hey, turn in old UFO videos to the archives. That's essentially all they had to do. Indefinite suspense can sometimes be the most dangerous pattern. Who benefits from these claims? So if this is a Psyop, if these hearings are a Psyop, or they have been manipulated into and to be used for a Psyop, who benefits? Obviously, defense and intel agencies are going to benefit if any attention is taken away from the legacy programs. If we're made to believe those are untouchable, we just can't go there, nobody involved in those is going to have to face any consequences for anything that they've done. Contractors are going to benefit if the scrutiny stays vague and there's no audit-driven reinforcement. Politicians are going to benefit from the theater, right? They get to grandstand in front of a camera, act like they're tough on this issue. They want answers, damn it. But no proof ever really comes. So it's a benefit for them because they get their headline, and also they don't have to worry about the repercussions of if anything actually did come out. If oversight turns into entertainment like it pretty much already has, the public is going to lose because we're more interested in the next whistleblower to come through than we are in the fact that the UAPDA just failed. And that was a gigantic blow to any kind of oversight or disclosure of this situation. Let's talk about the most plausible Psyop objectives. I was able to come up with a couple. One, the whole thing is cover for classified aerospace drone EW SIGINT capability that we have that we don't want getting out of the bag. Or maybe we're looking at a controlled disclosure where some of the truth will come out and shape interpretation, thereby limiting accountability. Those seem to be the two most likely objectives if these have been turned into a Psyop circus show, if you will. The hearings generate claims faster than the evidence can be validated. And if we look at claims that were made in 2023, and here we are almost 2026, and Grusch has still not sat in a SCIF to release the classified information he was discussing, that's a problem. That vacuum is going to get filled by anonymous sourcing, partisan tribalism, influencer interpretation, social media, trust me bro stuff. In an environment like that, psyops thrive. It's ripe for the picking. And I've said it before, the entire UFO community and research field is ripe for the picking of psyops, because just like regular journalism, a part of this is relying on intelligence officials for the data. And that means taking their word for it. Burchett wasn't able to get the Whistleblower Protection Act through. In fact, it's still in this technical status of introduced and sitting in committee. There's no vote that's scheduled to be had on that. So for all the rhetoric of protect the whistleblowers, they can't even get it advanced for a vote. I mean, it's getting ugly. On top of that, as I have mentioned multiple times on the show, you're probably sick of hearing it, they attached the UAP Disclosure Act to the National Defense Authorization Act. And then they completely gutted it the first go-round. By the third go-round, they just got rid of it, putting folks like Representative Burchett, Representative Luna, all of these congressmen from the UAP task force in a position where they have to vote for the NDAA to go through. You're not going to vote against the National Defense Authorization Act. In other words, you could lose your seat if you keep pursuing this and if you keep pushing too hard.